Hey everybody, welcome back to the Rowdy Podcast, and we are going to do our follow-up regarding Blue Earth County. Thanks for being patient with me, guys. Hello, is Captain Barta here?
I will get him for you.
Thank you.
Rowdy.
Captain
How you
Barta,
doing?
right?
Shaking hands?
Yes.
Nice to meet
How
you.
are you?
Sorry, I just had to wrap up the
That's
online
okay.
meeting. So,
Do you want to go somewhere else, or?
let's walk and see if this training room is open.
Okay,
That might be
perfect.
a better option for us. I just don't know if it's spoken for yet. Let's take a look.
Okay.
Nice day outside.
It's not bad. It's not too chilly. It's not too cloudy, so it's not terrible.
No rain. That's the main-
Yes, that's the best part.
Let's see if this one's- Of course, they're all taken. They're all spoken for. Let's see if we can get this media room up here. I don't think that's being used anymore.
Okay.
We had this room set up so the media could come in and do things, and it never really panned out to users.
Oh, okay.
We
Sure.
may just have to utilize the space. There's one other spot we could check upstairs, but I don't want to take all your time.
You're good. Yeah, I just like 10, 15 minutes, I guess.
So let's hang out here. Do you want to sit or stand?
Well, I don't care. Whatever you want to do.
I'm good.
We
I
can
just
sit.
as soon sit down. So,
Do you care if I take my mask off?
no, go ahead.
Okay. I figured you didn't, but I like to ask
No,
anyways.
I appreciate that. So, you wanted to, we talked through email, what, since about
Yeah,
the
so
last couple of weeks?
did you see the video?
I saw, I think, 3 different videos.
Okay. Did you see the one with your deputies in it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the gentleman that I spoke with, and I'm trying to think of his name.
There was Tony Adams,
Mm-hmm.
Jerry Billiard.
Is it Tony the lieutenant?
Tony was the supervisor that day.
Okay, yeah. So that was the person that I spoke with. And did you see the ending of that?
If you've got it handy,
I
let
can
me
even
see
play
again.
it. Yeah, it's easier if I just play it right now.
Because I remember there being 3 of them that were posted, or were brought to my, 3 or 4 of them, at least 3 of them that were brought to my attention.
They were all yours?
Well, there was somebody else that was restreaming or something.
Yeah. Yep.
So those, somebody had told me they thought that they were related, so then I watched those as well.
Okay, so let's see. So you know where this is, obviously.
Yep. I did see this. So we
Okay.
can watch it if you'd like to watch it again.
So-
I'm familiar with it.
I guess my question to you would be kind of what is your policies regarding the back there?
Okay. So here's what I want to kind of hit on right away. There's, I think, a couple of things that when I watched and I responded to your email that we needed to improve
Okay.
right off of the bat.
Sure.
And of those things, one was the complaint forms. There's some had been left out, and they apparently had been used and not replaced.
Okay.
So I kind of responded to you, I think, right away in the email when I had gotten back from
Yep.
vacation.
You did.
So those have been transitioned to electronic format to be available for everybody.
Awesome.
Okay. The other thing was the wait time. So you had, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rowdy, because I'm just replaying it in my
Sure.
mind. But I think you had gone over to the jail, went into the jail facility or the lobby over there,
Yep.
and had a conversation with one of the custody officer staff. They left.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of hung out in limbo for a while. Another one came out, you talked to him.
Well, I
He
asked
went
him,
back
yeah,
in.
because I had to ask where they were. I didn't, you know.
So that shouldn't have happened.
Mm-hmm.
So that was
I figured.
that was addressed, well, about the same day that the complaint was, once I started to get stuff caught up from being gone. And then at some point you were directed, I think, by them to come over here,
Mm-hmm.
which probably shouldn't have happened because if you had
It's a
an issue
different-
with the staff of them, it's all
Okay.
under the sheriff's office umbrella. But regardless, our goal is always to make sure that you've got service and you don't get jockeyed around from place to place and
Okay.
handed off to multiple different people. Then when you ended up over here, you ended up here for a while.
An hour.
And that shouldn't have happened either.
Okay.
So the point, and I'm going to get to your question about
Sure.
that access area. But my point, I guess, is that clearly on the video, there were things that we needed to improve.
Mm-hmm.
And I was not pleased to see, nor was the sheriff, how some of that stuff happened.
Okay.
One of our agency's philosophies is that if there are things that we need to improve on or do better, when that becomes we work on it immediately.
Okay.
So I think if I hope I expect that if you come back and you drop in on
Well, you
us
know I'm
again,
going to, right?
we need to do better.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the expectation that we're going to have, and it was addressed with those employees that were involved in the situation that day.
Okay.
Okay, and I don't remember on the email correspondence, because we went back and forth a few times.
Yeah.
If we talked about the signage, I think somewhere in there that was identified, or I said that was something that was under evaluation too.
I think that was
Signage
at the beginning, at the beginning of our conversation.
Yep, so that is something that is being addressed, and those signs are going to be changed.
Okay.
But I'll say this, the sign is a representation of what the expectation is of that area. And you and I may not agree on this, but I want to just kind of give you our perspective on it. If you have contact with somebody that represents what that sign would say, and they express to you what the sign would say, or represent or stand for, that's takes the place of the sign. So although those signs say no unauthorized vehicles beyond this point, or something to that effect, the fact that Lieutenant Adams came out and talked to you about it, explained to you that you couldn't be beyond that point, at least on the government property or Justice Center property.
But that's where it gets kind of tricky, right?
Okay.
So, because he didn't just say the government property, because one of the things I say in the video is, so if I contact the landowner who's to
You
the,
can walk in those fields if they don't have an issue.
sure.
Yeah.
So because what he explained and what the person prior to him explained to me, that was regarding, undercover vehicles back there that they didn't want pictured, and that was the expressed reason as to why. And so when we look at case law and we start to break things down, we start to look at different cases, and you can't always go to the Supreme Court to look at these things, but generally speaking, they base it off of a reasonable person would expect, a fenced-in area like what you have in the lot back there to be, not an area where you can protest, not an area where you don't have all these expectations of public interaction and public demonstration in that area. Outside of it, that's where it starts to become kind of interesting. So if you don't have a sign that says, no unauthorized personnel at all, and then somebody comes and tells me, well, actually, excuse me, let me back it. If it says no unauthorized vehicles, and I'm back there, and by the way, walking the way I went and got back there, there was no signs because I was on foot.
Correct.
And so I didn't see any signs at all.
But once you're given official notice that
Correct.
that area is not open to the public and you're not authorized to be back there, you can't be in that space. Okay. So
Well, I don't know.
You may not agree.
I
with
think
it,
the
but this
fence
has
is
gone
the-
through, but this has gone through legal representation for the county. So that's what I'm saying, Ron.
Sure.
There were things that I saw in the video that we felt we had to fix,
Mm-hmm.
and even the signage needs to be a little clearer. So we acknowledge that. But regardless, if you meet someone with lawful authority to restrict access to a space, and that is explained to you, and you then choose to still go into that space, then that opens you up, according to our beliefs and the county attorney's beliefs, to be subject to the trespassing statute.
Okay.
So if you disagree with that, I mean,
Well, my only concern with that is this. On the public website, the beacon.com, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
yeah,
Because I've done my research on it, and one of the big things is, and I also called the Blue Earth.
tax assessor.
It was a survey. Somebody that deals with that. I have it all recorded.
Tax
but
assessor generally does the
probably,
property.
yeah. Somebody who was dealing with properties, and I don't remember the gentleman's name, but I have it on recording. But just to kind of figure out where the lines, what is the rules back there. And two things I noticed is Beacon records back there, so they took pictures, and anyone can see back there with those cameras and those pictures. And so, to me, and here's another thing too, is I think even if you Google it, and I can check, but so this would then lead me to believe that there's maybe some misunderstandings in one way or another, right? So I don't know who you talked to. You said you guys got legal guidance on that. I don't know how that works, but for example, if I'm standing in the parking lot and an officer comes up and says you can't be here, I would challenge
That's
that.
public space.
Correct.
Yeah, that's not an area that we've ever deemed the reason to restrict access to. But you can't be back in that door.
I wouldn't go. Yeah.
That's an area that we've restricted access to. If that door was still open, Rowdy, and a law enforcement official was there, standing there saying, Rowdy, you can't come back.
Then I
if this
wouldn't go
door was
back there.
open.
Correct.
So it's really not that different on that outdoor space, in our opinion. What you
Sure.
would probably say is, I would anticipate, because I've been watching the video too, you went out in that field and then walked the perimeter of the property. And there's nothing that we can do to restrict that access. From that point, if you can film, lawfully be in a position to film, whatever you can film from that position, we really don't have a say about that. So whether it's the field, and unless someone with rightful access or permit or rightful ownership or access to that field with their ability to restrict
Says I can't be there.
you couldn't be. But if you walk on the county road back there, which you
cut
did
through,
and
yeah.
filmed, and if you're ever in a lawful position from our perspective to do that, but there are specific areas that we've restricted access to, and in that area beyond those signs are on the property. And I did, just for the sake of clarity,
Sure.
because I expected you, I saw too, you were kind of asking that question. So this is sort of a representation of what we're talking about. And if you remember, and I think you kind of came around this way
I
initially.
came right through here. Yep.
Yep. And so there's those signs there, and then up here and up here. And they're designed, and I kind of went around the property here, the property line. If you pulled up Beacon, you'd be able to see that.
Yep.
But this is the area deemed, that is not open to the public, and your access is not allowed back there.
Okay.
Okay.
Fair enough. So my recommendation to you guys then, just so, because as a a First Amendment auditor and things like that, one of the things that I won't do, and to give you the example with this door here, if you were standing there and said, yeah, I can't come in here, this isn't open, you're actively doing these things, I wouldn't go there. I wouldn't even try to I'm going to go in, I wouldn't do that.
I don't think you would either.
If you had signage across the field, not even fence, I'm not saying you have to have the whole thing fenced, but kind of like trespassing laws, right? Like if I call you and say somebody's on my property and I've asked them to leave, I want them off, that would be one thing. But also if I came to the sheriff's department and said, hey, I'm having problems with people being on my property, I'm going to sign the rights for you to enforce that whenever you see somebody on my property. And there's also no trespassing signs. It gives you guys a lot more availability to say, okay, well, you've already seen the sign, you had to walk past one, we're going to take you to jail if you're not going to leave right now, kind of thing.
You're right. So here's the one thing that I'd say about that. And you may not believe me on this, but your visit.
I don't have any reason to not believe you.
But some people may tell you things that you'd give you reason not to believe. People I expect may not always like it when you show up, and
Most
some
of the time
stuff that comes up. So for us, it's an opportunity to learn and improve. The one thing that I would say though, with respect to the signage, is I would say since we moved up here in 2009, I think you're about the only person that's been back there that we've had to initially, have a conversation with the front. There's been other people that have driven back there, and I'm not to say it's never happened, but it's pretty limited. I mean,
Sure.
it's not been like a chronic situation that we've had to address a lot.
Sure.
So when we had the sort of the review of the situation, we said, you know what, those signs aren't the best. They're just not. We need to change them out, and actually the work order's in to get some of that signage changed.
Which is awesome.
Now, whether or not it goes all the way around and spans the perimeter,
Well, I'm just saying, a reasonable, just something, I don't know, at least some sort of signage. Because I did walk over, if you watch the video, I don't know who the first officer that I talked to was, but when I walked to the left, and he said, here's the sign, and I said, well, see, that says unauthorized vehicles.
Yep.
If I would have seen a sign that said unauthorized personnel, I probably would have told you I recommend that you add a couple more at least, just because I've easily found the whole entire spot without seeing anything. I would have, but I would have never continued. You see what I'm saying?
So, and here's the thing I'd go back to with when I watched that video, you were respectful in the fact that when you went up and you had the conversation with Lieutenant Adams, and I think, I don't remember if it was your video, I did pull surveillance video from the building here just to see, and it looked like when you had gone on the south side of the building, you weren't by a sign, went around, had the discussion with them and then you were respectful to stay back past where those signs were once they provided the explanation of what was going on.
Because I like to make sure that I'm right before I just, you know what I'm saying? And I'm learning too. I've only been doing this for about 4 months. And, before George Floyd, before any of that, and my goal has always been, even through all of that, to try and create a dialogue, right? I think I've also been able to show those who watch that there's mistakes that happen, but one of the things that's beneficial is the conversation afterwards.
Sure.
Because I'll give you an example. Now all of those people know, okay, well, Captain Barta has addressed these things, he's told us. And I feel like a lot of times there's not enough into the matter. So it's just hey, this is what happened, okay, and that's it. And instead of figuring out, okay, well, you gotta give people the opportunity to fix themselves, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's why I like to come back and do this thing. But I also like to make sure I know what I'm talking about when I come back. And so we can have this dialogue and figure out kind of. So I have no problem not going back there. But just a couple of things to note is that that stuff is already out, and it's out basically by Beacon and by you guys, and it kind of seemed like the main problem was the camera. So my recommendation to you too is your verbiage is not yours, but anyone's verbiage is going to be really important on how they say things, and then also being clear. Hey, it's not about the camera; it's about the fact that we don't allow people back here. I'll bring up the sign thing. I do apologize about that, but I'm letting you know, that kind of thing. Instead of don't try it or don't try us.
Yeah, well,
that makes me want to try you a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, and here's the thing that I go back to too with the camera, and I don't know in particular how. Maybe the camera had something to do with it. Maybe it did.
Do you think he would have reacted the same if I were back there holding a sign that's it says whatever? Think about whatever. Black Lives Matter. Let's just say.
Like beyond the.
Yeah, like if I were back there and I was holding a sign and it just said Black Lives Matter.
Beyond the restricted access area.
Correct.
Behind those, do I think that would have changed anything?
Yes. If I were to just stand there with a sign and I don't say anything to anyone and I just hold the sign, do you think?
Do you?
Yeah, I do.
How so? What would you think would change?
The reason I say is just based off of the reaction that in conversation that we had, it seemed it was the camera that was the problem. It wasn't the First Amendment that's the problem. And where I'm going with that is that if I were back there holding a sign that says, Black Lives Matter, let's just say, or Blue Lives Matter, doesn't matter, I don't think I would get grief. I think if I stood...
I see what you're saying.
You know what I mean? And I think
see what you're saying.
If I put a camera up, that's where the grief will come.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I don't know if I agree. I think
that's fair.
Anybody that's back there, because I've done it too, where we have a vehicle that just turns up back there, and it's somebody looking because they're supposed to go to the jail lobby. They didn't see where to go, or whatever, and they end up just getting confused and driving around. And we make contact with them. We talk to them. Hey, you can't be here. This is a restricted access area, not open to the public. Oh, geez, I'm sorry. Where do I need to go to get to the jail or whatever? That happens.
Sure.
Whether or not it had, so I don't know if I agree with you. I guess.
Okay.
The camera,
and we won't know, which is fine.
But the camera to some people, as you know, elevates their anxiety or maybe the reaction.
Sure.
And I think that it's a valid discussion and a point to make sure everybody has a firm understanding that in a public area that's open, that you can't restrict that, and you need to almost just forget that it's there and treat everything like you would whether or not the camera is there.
Sure.
I mean, that's my philosophy, my opinion on it, because
most of the time you are on camera anyways.
Well, actually, that's what we try to remind everybody is if you act like you're on camera all the time, because there's a very good chance that you are anyway. So.
Yeah, I mean they're all over.
But you're right. I don't know if we will or would know specifically on the sign. I just can tell you that if somebody's back there, whether it's somebody that's just lost, confused, they don't think it matters, and they just want to see what's going on and walk back there. It happens from time to time, but not a lot. I mean, probably on one hand you can count it in a year or two. So, but no, the signs will get changed. I don't know that it's going to get to the extent that you're talking.
Sure.
If there was more incidents that happened to cause it, we aren't opposed to doing that. It's not a matter of funding, money, anything like that. It's just sort of addressing what we need to address to make sure that it's reasonable and it is an understanding. So,
sure, and I think that's fair. I would say the last thing that I kind of want to discuss real quick is just when you have a supervisor who seems to kind of come off at the beginning professional, and then when you challenge even a little bit, it seems like there's some major pushback there with. And my question to you is that something that's trained? Is that kind of, I mean, how do we fix those kind of things so we don't have to worry about service like that?
Well, so I do know in my perception of it, and I think it may be part of what you're trying to call out. I'm curious if the interaction from both sides was different, if the conversation would have been different. So, I mean, I'll just cut to the chase. I think at times, and say if you completely disagree, you may take a position where you're trying to see if you can get a reaction and push the envelope a little bit to get that reaction, which then gets maybe a different reaction from some people on the law enforcement side of things. Whether or not that's right, wrong, or different, but
I would tend to agree. Yeah.
So I mean, when you kind of came running up from the jail and looking in the Sally Port and stuff like that, I mean that's a little different than somebody coming in and saying, you know what I mean? I think, and if you're going to do that, I mean that's on you. I think it can sometimes get a little bit of a different response than. other
So,
approaches.
but let me ask you a question. And this is, I say this to everyone, so you're not the
Yeah.
first one.
Yeah.
You're 100% right. Like, I am going to see what happens.
Yeah.
And I'm also going to see where I can go. And I'm going to go anywhere and everywhere that I possibly can.
Sure.
Right? To see what happens. I mean, that's 100% exactly what I'm doing. And I would ask you, do you think the approach would be different if you didn't, let's just use this in a field where maybe you would see it more. If you're sitting on the side of the road running a speed trap and you pull somebody over and the officer says, hey, you know why I pulled you over? Yeah, I was speeding. Why do you have to deal with me? Why do you have to do that to me? Leave me be. Do you feel anything different because you were looking for that person that was messing up? Or do you kind of feel like, listen, man, just because you messed up doesn't mean that, I have to, you got to treat me badly. It's my fault you were speeding. You see what I'm saying?
I'm not sure I follow you. Are you saying, so if I'm
So
conducting a speed enforcement operation versus just coming across you?
Yeah, so I'm basically, like, my job is to go around and see what happens, and how do we improve those is what I would add into that, right? So I'm going around seeing what's happening, and I'm catching whatever that may be, whether it's good or bad.
Sure.
And so what I'm kind of relating to is if you're doing speed enforcement and you find somebody who's doing 80 in a 55, and you pull them over and say, hey, you're going fast as heck, I got to give you a ticket, and that person starts giving you grief. Is your response going to be, okay, well, that person's upset because of the fact that I caught them doing something bad? Or is your response going to be, well, maybe I shouldn't have been there to catch them? The odds are you're going to put it in the first one, right? And the latter is probably going to...
I don't necessarily agree with that.
Okay.
I just don't. I think what we're talking about potentially is a difference in personality from individual to individual, whether they're a law enforcement officer or any other job that exists potentially.
But my job is to catch people doing naughty things or good things, right? And then report on that. Your job is to catch people doing bad things, naughty things, and then, obviously take them off the street, right? So my point is that...
We may disagree on that.
Okay.
A little bit, but
fair
go
enough.
on.
But my point is on that, I mean, that's what I think of when I think of the police, is to get the bad guy, to get the guy who may be trying to break into my home, those kind of things, right?
Okay.
And so my point is that we're all out there trying to make the world a safer, better place. The way that I do it and the way that you do it are different. But, you got speed traps, fake coke deals that you catch, not you guys specifically, but law enforcement in general, right? You have fake prostitutes, all those things to catch the
So you're
bad
talking
guys.
about undercover operations.
Correct.
I wouldn't call them fake, but they're undercover operations.
Yeah,
It's not
okay.
intense.
We'll call it undercover. But in speed enforcement, I mean, you're waiting to see if somebody's going to break the law. You're not worried about the people that aren't breaking the law. You're worried about the people who are. The same goes for me. I mean, if somebody doesn't say anything to me and they just treat me like a normal person, it probably won't even go up, except for good. Like, hey, these are positive reactions.
Yeah. The only thing I'd say again, and you may leave here with a different perspective than what I have,
Sure.
is that because I kind of get the parallel you're trying to draw. The only thing I would say is that sometimes behavior around things like a jail facility,
Sure.
or a restricted access space, whether or not we agree on how
Sure.
that is laid out, maybe it gets a different response than it would from somebody, the general public, that's speeding. Because there's maybe a heightened level of awareness or concern if somebody
True.
is in that area for one reason or another.
Sure.
I'll give you an example. The jail, we've had it where we've got suspicious vehicles during a transport that are following a transport vehicle around. Now, that may be somebody just saying, I wonder what the response would be if I follow this transport vehicle, to see where that transport vehicle driver might be saying, I don't know if somehow word got out that this individual who's in custody is getting transported to another facility, and they're trying to take us out to let the person escape. That's what I'm saying. I don't know if I can completely agree with you on the.
And I get that. That part is a valid thing, but where I would say it's really important to understand is even when you up the ante and we talk about the jail and all this stuff, restricted areas, the Constitution in and of itself doesn't change, right?
The Constitution doesn't change, but the expectation of us to make sure that the facility or the business that's going on is a little different. Now, again, my feeling is that, if you rush up to a Sally Port with a door that's going to close with a prisoner going in or being brought in there, that's just not normal. That doesn't happen every day. We may disagree on whether or not it should or shouldn't.
It may not be
treated
normal.
But that behavior in and of itself, will maybe cause a different reaction, or should probably cause a different reaction, at least in a heightened awareness sense, than somebody walking into the jail saying, you know, I don't understand why there's no license plate on that vehicle. That's all I'm saying.
Sure.
Now we can talk for days probably on differences in approach to handling situations, personalities in law enforcement or general, you know, citizens, and the most appropriate way to interact with somebody, you know, on the street. And I'm sure you know, 4 months you said that you've been kind of doing this, and my guess is that you've probably run the gamut on your interactions with law enforcement.
I've sat down and had great conversations with chiefs of police, and I've had really bad, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So to me, I mean, I think that the difference in my mind is that law enforcement standard needs to be a little higher than some other standards. The ability to interact with those people needs to be higher because the expectation from the public is
higher.
Because of the trust that's given to those people by virtue of their position and their authority. Now,
I would agree with you 100% on that. I think that's a great way to state it.
And not everybody's not perfect, and I would guess in the 4 months in which you met law enforcement people, probably throughout, is it beyond Minnesota?
Yes.
Country, so nationwide. Although,
I mean, I've only done a couple of different places, but yeah, it's been outside the state.
And so, I mean, to me, that gamut, it probably runs the gamut, as does you know, interactions with the general population. But I think it's just a matter of making sure that we continue to strive for a higher level of, you know,
so with that statement in mind, and just to kind of wrap it up, I guess my question to you, because this is kind of where it comes down, do you think at the end of the day there is a way that could have been handled better, you know, verbally speaking, in regards to your officers?
I do.
And are you going to train them on that kind of stuff?
Yeah. You know, the conversation occurs, and as I said, when we have an opportunity to improve, the expectation from the administration of this agency is that we address it and we improve. Okay. Now, I think that when you're found in a space like you were when you got back there, whether or not you saw signs or whatever, but you ended up back there, I would prefer that it's a conversation with a clear and concise explanation of what is going on, what's expected, and be more cordial, you know?
I think that's the biggest part, because generally speaking, you know, I'm a mirror for the most part. And I think if you watch most of my videos, there's only one time I ever cussed officers out, and that was after being assaulted. Besides that, you really don't hear it. I just don't speak to people in that manner. Yeah. So you don't, I mean, I know that they don't know that. They don't know what they're going to be dealing with, because most of the time people don't meet me and realize what I'm doing until we're already in it. But I think it's the, just kind of the way you go about it. Hey, Rowdy, listen, I get it. I know you're doing your job. I get that. That's fine. But here's what I'm told. We'll look into it. But for right now, you know, we'll pass this up. For right now, do me a solid and just not go. Okay, we can have a conversation about this. Sure. Okay, can I come back and have that conversation with you about what you've discovered? Yeah, if you don't go back there right now, we'll invite you back and we'll talk about it. Yeah. You know, and that would be good to me.
How often, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
About how often, if you had to guess, give me a percentage on.
Let me double check something.
Yeah, we're curious to see what time it is.
Okay, we're good. Okay, yep, and I told her I was gonna be 10, 15 minutes late.
And I won't keep you going, but I'm just curious on the interactions that you've had about that 4 months. Give me a percentage. Where, you know, cordial explanation, all that, versus the other side of it.
So I think what you're basically asking me, the way that I would verbalize it, is passes versus fails. Because not every time, I'll give you an example. I put a video up today where the officers came out, they asked me questions, I refused to give them my ID, but they asked me everything, and they were curious, you know, suspicious, curious, whatever you want to call it. Naturally, if you're going to be in this line of work, you have to be. Otherwise, you're going to be a terrible cop. So that's all fine and well. I would give them a pass, though, because the end state is the way that they talk to me. Yes, they asked all the same questions you might want to know. Hey, I'm just curious, you know, would you mind showing me ID? I say no, we have a conversation about why. They were cordial, though. You know, so I would say probably like 70% of the time, it goes really well.
Good.
In the sense that they may ask me questions. They have every right to ask questions, just like I have every right to ask questions. But the manner in which people do it, probably about 70-75% of the time, it's done pretty darn well. I may not agree with their overall stance, but how they've gone about informing me of it is totally different.
So it's not adversarial, and it's more cordial and professional, and
I would probably say that out of all my interactions, I think I have like 33 or 34 videos out, 35 maybe. Out of all of those, there's always some interesting things that I don't agree with, but I would probably say there's only like 4 or 5, like where I'd be like, oh, what are you thinking? That's you know what I mean? Like that wasn't the right thing to say or
And
do.
you said predominantly Minnesota?
Yeah.
So you,
I mean, like Oklahoma City, though, for example. I mean, I was so close to their officers while filming. You could watch the video online, but they were great, you know. And we did the best to stay out of their way we possibly could. So,
I was curious how Minnesota would stack up against other states.
we're gonna find out soon.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say right now I can give you kind of by the city level. I think the farther you're into the metro, actually, the more accustomed to different things they are, and so you generally don't run into any negative reactions or interactions until you hit that one specific person, and maybe they're just having a bad day, or maybe they are that specific person that I'm looking for, and that's what I'm looking for. Is I'm looking for somebody who shows that they don't have a level head, that they don't care, you know. And then I'm also looking for somebody like yourself. I would say that you're a person that cares, because you've emailed me many a times to try and so we can schedule this and we can work our schedules out and things like that. And I want to show that too. So here in this scenario the way I look at it, and the way that my viewers probably will look at it, the majority of them will say, okay, yes, there's this thing, this mess up, whatever. But those have all been addressed, and now they're seeing change happen, and they're figuring out that if we go in and have conversation, change can take place, and no one has to be hurt, no buildings need to be burned, you know, nobody needs to be shot. All these things that I think are really important, and I think everyone wants. I don't think you're the kind of person that's like, I want to shoot you. I don't think that at all, right? You're probably the person that's like, God, that's the last thing I want. It's the last thing I want. And so if we can kind of look at it and say, okay, well, we're all on the same page. Nobody wants to get hurt. Nobody wants anyone else to get hurt. So how do we fix the relationship? Well, it's like this. This is how we fix it. And then we set that precedent too by putting it online and saying, hey, instead of listening to the news, here's a reality. Here's an issue that was had, and then it was resolved. And here's what leadership did, and here's the steps. So everything that you listed earlier. I mean, that's how you fix it. The media going around just showing, okay, well, here's a shooting. Well, okay, but what happened afterwards? How do you fix that? That's not happening, and it bugs me.
Yeah, no, it's just nice to hear that, you know, what your, I guess, approach or how you're conceptualizing change. It isn't just simply, you know, and I gotta admit, I've not done a ton of research, watched a ton of your videos. I just haven't.
That's okay.
Time doesn't always.
I mean, I'd appreciate it if you would, because I get paid. But
but you know, I think you've hit on something, and if there is a solution to the problem, it's better to identify and work towards the solution than calling out the problem and just letting the problem be the problem.
Well, I'll tell you, and that's exactly what my old SAR major said. He said, don't come to me with a problem, come to me with a solution. Right? And I think a lot of SAR majors, and maybe it's something that's taught in Sergeant Major Academy, I don't know, but that's kind of the overall thing. Is like, okay, there's a problem, but how do we work towards the fixing it? Let's not just bitch about the fact that there's a problem. How do we?
You can bitch all day long.
Yeah, but nothing's going to get
anything,
changed.
so.
And so that's what I'm trying to do. And so I appreciate you taking the time to sit down and meet with me, and for the continued correspondence.
Yeah.
You know, trying to set this up, because it may seem insignificant to a lot of people. Why is it so important to sit down face to face for 15, 20 minutes? But to me, it is very important. I think a lot of the viewers will find it to be very important, because it's something that they don't get often.
Well, good, and that's not good that they don't.
No, but that's the media. I mean, I think that's the media's fault too.
Well, and so, you know, I know you've got to get going, and I don't want to make you more late for the next meeting. But again, going back to the expectations, the complaint thing, I mean, we can figure out ways that it's there shouldn't be. Our obligation is to make sure that things are done in a timely manner, and we address things. And the biggest thing that I saw initially when I watched that video was the fact that we were struggling to make sure, and we left somebody handing off. It was like to me calling and getting handed off in a phone tree. That needs to be addressed so that we make sure, because if you're in the public service sector, it's making sure that you're providing the service. And one thing I don't like is I've been in the situations where you try to address something or have a conversation and you get handed off from 10 different people. You know.
Yeah.
So when there's a problem, it's our obligation to fix the problem, to do our best to address it.
And I think you'll find that like a lot of the time, for me anyways, oopsies, for me anyways, depending on how even the response is to like the, hey, there's a problem, I have the choice of whether I put it out or not. I mean, I might be able to put it out and say, hey, here's what happened, yes, but, and I've done that. Eden Prairie was a great example of that, where there was an issue, but I waited to put the whole entire video out until I had the interview done too. I like to do that, but it depends on the mentality, you know what I mean? And I didn't know when I was gonna get back down here, but, you know, so that's why, all depending on the response and how quickly you can get to somebody's complaint, I guess I can only speak for me because I'm a First Amendment owner, but the response might be different, because it could be we could resolve that problem and that whole entire video shows from start to finish even the resolution. And then maybe you don't get phone calls and stuff like that. I mean, I'm just brainstorming here for better. I'm gonna give you my business card
Oh, I should
too.
do that too, right? Actually, I was gonna paper clip it on there and I forgot.
All good. So I'll give you that. Perfect. And I'll keep yours. If you ever need anything from me, and I tell this to a lot of people, a lot of departments, if you ever want somebody to come in and talk about it, how do you deal with cameras? I'd be happy to have that discussion, you know, and try to help you guys. But the premise is basically what you said already. Just assume you're on camera because you probably are. Yeah. But what sounds better? I can help you guys with that if you want, to kind of give the best service possible in terms of I know you're not in customer service, but you kind of are by nature,
We kind of,
you know? So how do you give the best customer service? So I you know, if you guys ever need that, you can always let me know.
yeah, no, definitely. I'll take, and I know that I'll follow up with the sheriff.
Okay.
And he was actually gonna drop by the day that you were gonna come.
Then
in.
I was gonna come up and reschedule,
He
yeah.
wanted to come by and meet you too, and then it just didn't.
We can always set that up too. I'd love to come out at some point. If you guys, you know, I can come down all the time.
If you, next time you're in the area.
Sure.
Oops, I dropped the paper clip here. Next time you're in the area, if you wanna stop by and just introduce, no
Sure.
issues with that. I did promise you resolution. It's not gonna have a ton of detail.
Sure.
But this is your copy on it, and it, because of chapter 13 stuff.
Sure.
So, there's that. And then I do have this as well.
Okay.
Just, I
You
just
can keep
attach
that.
it. Well,
Yeah.
I've already got a copy.
Oh, you got a copy?
So
Okay,
that's
cool.
your kind of copy, just to associate with it. And this is yours too.
Cool.
So that's all I got for you. And I think you've got all my phone numbers.
I do.
Email address,
Yep.
we're good on that. So anything else before you get
No,
rolling?
I appreciate your time.
Take care. It was
Thank
very
you very
nice
much.
to meet you.
Do me a favor, please let everyone know that I want them to be safe. If you guys need anything from me, let me know. Okay?
I
All right.
appreciate it.
God bless you guys. Take care.
Take care, Rowdy.
Have a good day.